Hello everyone, it's DJ. Welcome back to our series on military divorces, or as you saw, the military divorce minefield. Is there a better way to describe it? At least from my perspective, I think not. It certainly seems like you're walking through a minefield no matter which side of the party you're on. Even if you're a neutral retirement services officer trying to give advice, it seems like a pretty dangerous path to follow. So this week, let's talk about the one that is the nastiest. This is what causes much wailing and gnashing of teeth for both parties in the divorce, and that is division of retired pay. This is easily the one that causes the most spite, the most disagreements, the most motions in court. In no other area have I witnessed a level of argument and emotion as I have with division of retired pay. And adding to the confusion on both sides, though, is the fact that every state treats division of retired pay differently. Every single one. Puerto Rico, for example, does not divide military retirement at all. Indiana requires the service member to be eligible for retired pay, meaning having 20 years of qualifying service already at the time of divorce, or they will not divide anything. North Carolina requires that you have expert testimony attesting to the value of the retirement plan, of the pension. It gets weirder. Maine does not allow for the computation of cost of living allowances or COLAs when awarding retired pay to a former spouse. So if they do give something to the former spouse, it's at that rate only, and the dollar amount never goes up. Some states are a shall divide state. They might do it, they might not. Other states shall divide means you will do it. And other states are a may divide state. So it's up to the judges, it's up to the attorneys, and the parties involved in the divorce. If you're in a may divide state, the service member might keep his pension, might not. Anything you may have heard about a one-size-fits-all formula for divorces and dividing military retired pay is patently false. Just keep that in mind. Everything I'm about to talk about, really for the rest of this series, is going to be different depending on the state where you live. I'm going to give you the information I have. This is, call it an 80% solution. This is some things you can expect, but every state has its own little quirks. In fact, California, and some of the other western states can divide retired pay, and they'll give the former spouse a choice. You can either have, particularly if the service member is still in service, the western states, some of them will say to the former spouse, you can either have the service member's retirement part of it when they actually start to receive it, which could be 10 or 20 years from now, after they have potentially served for more years and maybe even been promoted a time or two, or you can take what they are eligible to have right now and have them immediately pay a portion of it. Well, even if you're not receiving the benefit, apparently in some states you can still pay for it, because that, in some cases, from what I've read, seems to be where the former spouse often goes. Yes, I'll take the guarantee now versus the maybe later. So, like I said, everything I'm about to describe could be different in your state. I'm just going to give you what's the most common information, and in one case, almost a one-size-fits-all, but even then, not really. So, as I said in the last episode, I am not an attorney, I'm not even a paralegal. I'm just a retirement services officer with quite a bit of experience. and I can use the internet to actually learn things. So, guess what I've been doing for the last several weeks besides developing other shows? Yes. And, of course, having to take real-life examples of this and learn from those helps greatly as well. So, let's dive into this topic, see what we can learn. First of all, let's go into what's called the Uniformed Services Former Spouses Protection Act. This allows for the division of retired pay during a divorce. This was passed in the early 80s, and except for one recent modification, it gives very few definitive rules on how the division of pay is going to occur. It tells states they have the authority to do so, but not a whole lot of guidance on the how. And that's, of course, what led to all these different techniques. For example, it sometimes allows for up to 50% of retired pay after certain deductions to be directly deposited into the former spouse's bank account by the Military Pay Center. In the case of the Army, Air Force, and Navy, that would be the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. But the Former Spouse Protection Act says nothing about courts requiring a higher amount from the service member, like more than 50%. And if that happens, then even if the pay center is depositing that 50% into the former spouse's account, the service member, is still liable for the rest, and you have to pay that out of pocket. So, again, very little definitive guidance. And let me describe how that division actually works. One second, my glasses are dirty, so I need to clean them. Alright, so now I'm going to look really closely here at my script. Yes, how the division of pay actually works. First, the pay center is going to determine what is called Disposable Retired Pay, or DRP. I'm going to use both terms during this episode and probably all future episodes in this series. This is gross retirement pay minus certain deductions. So minus VA compensation, if there's an offset there, minus survivor benefit premiums, taxes, and any other money that might be owed to the government. So once those deductions have occurred, this leaves what's called disposable retired pay. This is what is actually divided. So if there's a divorce decree that says 50% of retired pay goes to the former spouse, it's not gross pay, it's 50% of disposable pay. That sounds almost like throwing it away. But anyway, 50% of disposable retired pay is what's actually divided, or whatever percentage it might actually be. But wait, it gets better. Like I said, it's possible to have money deposited directly into the former spouse's account, but it's not always that simple. DFAS and the other pay centers, and for you civilians out there, DFAS is the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. That's the pay center for the Army, Air Force, and Navy. DFAS will not always make it that easy. There is a little understood rule, often called the 10-10 rule, which requires 10 years of marriage to the service member, and that the marriage overlap at least 10 years of military service. If this happens, then the pay center will do direct deposit into the former spouse's account if there's a division of pay. If not, they won't do it. And contrary to what the barracks lawyers say and what all kinds of rumors and even civilian attorneys might say, that 10-10 rule, or 10 years of marriage, does not automatically make one eligible for 50% of assets. That is not true. That's what a lot of people say, but it is not the case. at least not in the military. But there's nothing that says that courts still can't do it. It all comes back to what does your state do. So let me describe what's going to happen here if you actually meet that 1010 requirement. If it does happen, then the former spouse will need to file a form, of course. This is the military, which is part of government, so there's always a form, right? That form is Department of Defense or DD Form 2293. We'll need to file that form with a court-certified copy of the court order authorizing the division of retired pay with the member's pay center. And again, for Army, Navy, and Air Force, that's the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, Coast Guard and Marine Corps, Public Health Service, and NOAA. They all have their own individual pay centers. So we'll have to file the 2293 with the right pay center. If you don't know what that is, ask me. I'll give you the answer. If that 1010 rule is not met, though, and the division of pay occurs in the divorce, then the member will have to pay out of pocket rather than having it deducted from his retirement. Wow. All right, I digressed quite a bit with that last bit on 1010. Let's go back to the amount of pay that the former spouse will receive and how all that's computed. I've gone over how to get to the disposable retired pay amount. That amount the amount paid to the former spouse can either be a flat dollar amount or a percentage of DRP, disposable retired pay. If that flat amount is chosen, that amount will stay constant for years to come. It's fixed. But if it's a percentage, then that amount will change as COLAs, cost of living allowances, are applied to the retired pay. Now, there are some folks out there that say that there are 4 methods of computing the division of pay. That's not really true, because the other 2 are just variations on either the flat dollar amount or the percentage method. So really 2. There's just 2. So, when you have a division of pay, it's up to the courts, of course, how they do it. But now that you've computed retired pay, what do? Well, what happens next is going to depend on a number of factors. If a member is still serving, then the military pension division order, remember that from the last episode, the MPDO has to state that the member's rights under the Service Members Civil Relief Act have been honored, and that is an area where I'm going to stay out. There's also a question of the marital fraction, and that part of the computation is going to be a bit confusing. In fact, we prepared for some math in this episode. Warning, for those of you who watched the show Lost in Space, danger, Will Robinson. I just noticed something interesting. My camera has restarted its timer. Excuse me. So there's probably a video skip that I'll have to identify. All right, we'll get to that later. So what the heck is this marital fraction that I mentioned? And no, this isn't math class. In fact, if you're afraid of numbers, then this might be a bad episode for you. This might seem more like abstract algebra, but don't be scared. Just dive into the pool with me and start kicking, and eventually your head will break water and some semblance of sense will be made. It will come to you. I'm going to make the numbers as simple as I can, even though it might look intimidating at first. So I said earlier that each state divides retired pay differently, so please keep that in mind as I go through these examples. I'm just trying to give you a very basic idea of what happens. And as they say on so many commercials, your experience may vary. And if you're wondering why I have the coughing and whatnot going on, I'm getting over a recent illness, so please forgive that, especially if it's affected my voice, which I'm pretty sure it has. So the basic description of this marital fraction that I mentioned is this. What portion of retired pay was earned during the time the service member was married to the former spouse? That's what they're trying to answer. And for those of you in podcast land, I do have to apologize because you're not going to see what I will put up on the screen for people watching YouTube land. So I'll try to spell it out verbally. So this might be a little difficult. I know numbers are difficult to comprehend, especially when you're just listening, but I'll do my best. So the marital fraction equation, if you want to call it that, is this. Marital asset, or the former spouse's portion of pay, is disposable retired pay times, and then parentheses, marital service divided by total service times court-ordered percentage. So if I were to spell that out, it would be disposable pay times marital overlap divided by total service. That's all together. And then you multiply that by the percentage. So marital service time is the overlap of marriage with the service member's military service. For reservists, that could be difficult to comprehend sometimes. For reservists, it's dealing specifically with the number of retirement points earned during that marital overlap. It's not necessarily how many years of service you had, although that's a factor. It's looking particularly at how many points were earned during the time of the marriage. All right, so here's the same formula for reservists. So it's going to sound very similar to what I read a moment ago. But marital asset equals disposable retired pay times marital service retirement points divided by total retirement points multiplied by court-ordered percentage. And for those of you in podcast land, I do recommend that you go look at the article that I'll post on Friday with this formula written out. It will be a lot easier to understand. So now let's make some sense of this equation. Let's add some numbers to it. It will make a lot more sense once some numbers are added to it. So let's assume that the disposable retired pay for this mythical service member is $2,000. The member had 5,000 retirement points and earned 3,500 of those points while married to the former spouse. When I wrote this, I just made up the numbers, and it actually turned out to be some pretty darn easy math. So the court has awarded 50% of whatever that marital fraction amount is to the former spouse. So in the equation, when I write it out this time, I'm just going to call the marital asset, meaning what the former spouse gets, M, just so you know. So M equals, open brackets, 2,000 times, open parentheses, 3,500 divided by 5,000, close parentheses, close brackets, times 50%. I'll go through that one more time in case you were writing that down out in podcast land. And for those of you on YouTube, I'll put it on the screen. So M equals, open brackets, $2,000 times, open parentheses, 3,500 divided by 5,000, close parentheses, close brackets, times 50%. Alright, so let's simplify this. I know we're getting back to 7th grade algebra, and that can be a long time for some of us, particularly me. But a review of the basic order of operations in mathematics says that we solve what's in parentheses first. So we'll start off by dividing 3,500 by 5,000. If we do that, then we get 0.7. So now the equation looks like this. M equals $2,000 times 0.7 times 50%. So now we solve for what was originally in brackets. Multiply $2,000 by 0.7. We end up with $1,400 times 50%. We're almost there. Now we multiply $1,400 by 50%. The former spouse's portion of retired pay is $700 per month, or 35% of the service member's disposable retired pay. So M equals $700. And if we divide $700 by 2,000, then that's 35%. Does that make sense? I really hope so, because I'm about to do something truly evil to all of you. I'm going to toss that equation out the window. Why, DJ? Why would you do that? You just led us through this torturous maze of numbers over our podcast and over our YouTube episode, and now you want us to throw all that out? Yeah, pretty much. So that's how it used to be. But there's been a change in the law as of about a year and a half ago. Back in 2016, late 2016, so the National Defense Authorization Act of 2017 made a bit of a change. And just how bad is it? Well, let's see. States used to have a lot of flexibility in determining what the marital fraction had to be, and that's now a little different. So the states used to decide whether pay was based on rank and points at the time of divorce, or if it was based on rank and points at the time the member began to receive retired pay. But that change in the law that I mentioned, which took effect on 23 December 2016, that changed it all. So when retired pay is divided by a divorce decree, a quadro, erroneously, or a military pension division order, and the member is still serving, those are the key words, then the variables for that equation that I just showed you change quite a bit. And the things that can be considered are a little different, and it's been set uniformly for all states and territories. That change does not apply, though, for people whose divorce occurs after the member is no longer serving, meaning they're either in the retired reserve or they're already receiving retired pay. But if they're still serving, this matters quite a bit. So, let's get into it. For those people to whom the law does apply, the marital asset is now based on the retirement points earned during the marriage and the pay grade and time in service the member had attained on the date of the divorce. That changes the equation quite a bit, as you'll see. The previous example included total years of service and highest grade held. Under these new rules, pay grade and years of service could be significantly different, especially if the member serves several additional years and is promoted a time or two after the divorce. So that new formula is going to look quite different. So I'll just read it out as I wrote it in the script here, and then I will define all the terms for you. So M equals DRP times, open bracket, open parentheses, MRP, that's Mike Romeo Papa, divided by Tango Romeo Papa, close parentheses, times, open parentheses, Mike Papa Golf, times Hotel Papa Golf, close parentheses, close brackets. And I'll put this on the screen so you can see it. Now, for those of you following along, here's what all the letters mean. So M, at the beginning of the equation, is marital asset. how much does the former spouse actually get. DRP, Delta Romeo Papa, is disposable retired pay, as I described before. Mike Romeo Papa is marriage retirement points. Oh, and by the way, I just made up these terms just so I could put a hopefully simple equation on the screen. These are not official terms. But MRP is marriage retirement points, the total points earned during the marriage. Tango Romeo Papa is total retirement points. Mike Papa Golf is marriage pay grade, so the rate of pay in effect on the date of the divorce. And Hotel Papa Golf is highest pay grade, the rate of pay in effect when the member begins to receive retired pay. This assumes the possibility of promotion and additional years of service, as I said before. And you can see this is much more complex. It's now, really, it's impossible to come up with a percentage of what the former spouse will receive until the service member begins receiving retired pay himself or herself. Because you have to know how much the member is receiving and what the highest pay grade is and all of that in order to even work this equation. Now, I'm borrowing the example I'm about to give from one of the many articles I read while researching this topic. I've got a link to it in the show notes. I won't read that, but look in the article that posts on Friday, and you'll see a link to the equation I'm about to give. This explains things very well, and I figured I'll just reproduce it here. The website is increa.com, INCREA.com, India November Charlie Romeo Echo Alpha.com. This is an Air Force Reserve of 06 who's done quite a bit of research into military matters and other things that interest him. He put together several very well written, although I did catch the occasional typo, that's okay. But some very well written articles and this excellent equation demonstrating how the change in the law actually works in this new division of retired pay. So, let's go through this real quick. And just as a warning, what I have in my article versus his are going to be slightly different just due to rounding. So, forgive that. So we'll start off by calculating the total retired pay. And we're going to say that's $5,000 per month. We know that 4,700 retirement points were earned during the marriage, and the total number of retirement points earned during the member's career were 5,500. The retired pay based on the member's rank, years of service, and points earned during the marriage equates to $3,298 per month. The court has awarded 50% of the marital fraction to the former spouse. Here's how the formula appears with the numbers plugged in. M equals, open parentheses, 5,000 times, open brackets, open parentheses, 4,700 divided by 5,500, close parentheses, times, open parentheses, $3,298 divided by $5,000, close parentheses, close bracket, close parentheses, times 50%. So that was very fast, but of course, it's in writing, and you're seeing it on the screen. And if you're in podcast land, you're probably driving or working out or going for a speed walk. You're probably not trying to write this down. But you can always check my article on Friday and find it. So it's simple. So let's work through this thing. It's not as bad as it appears on its surface. When we divide 4,700 by 5,500, we get 0.8545, or 85.45%. Dividing $3,298 by $5,000 equals 0.6596 or 65.96%. So the equation now looks like this. M equals 5,000 times, let me back up. M equals, open parentheses, 5,000 times, open brackets, open parentheses, 85.45% times 65.96%, close bracket, close parentheses, times 50%. You see, it's getting simpler. It's not as scary now. In fact, we're almost done with this. The next step is to multiply those two percentages together. That gives us 56.36%. So now the equation is just M equals $5,000 times 56.36% times 50%. It's getting a lot easier. So we multiply the total retirement amount by 56.36%. That gives us $2,818.14. This is the marital fraction of the member's retired pay. A long way to get to that point, but we're finally there. So the marital fraction is 56% of total retired pay, and the court has awarded the former spouse 50% of that amount. So the former spouse will receive $1,409 per month. Like I said, it's all going to be in writing on Friday, so you can pull down those numbers and show them to others as a teaching aid. So this is actually a considerable difference from the formula I showed earlier. If we use the previous formula, the amount of pay the former spouse would have received would have been $2,136 per month versus $1,409 that I just described. So that's a $700 difference. In fact, one of the arguments in favor of this change of the law is that the promotion and additional years of service did not happen during the marriage and therefore should not be included in retired pay. That's personally what I think was the basis for this law change, was that kind of mindset. An argument against that new rule, however, sometimes called the marital foundation theory, states that the final pay grade and years of service were built on the joint efforts of the service member and former spouse during the marriage. And you can find articles supporting both of these standpoints in the references section. I read some very interesting arguments on both sides while preparing for this. All right, I think I've tortured you enough with numbers and talk of dividing retired pay. It's time for us both to take a quick break, I think. So let's wrap it up for this week. I, as always, appreciate you being here and your consuming this particular media with me. I do ask that if you find this useful, that you click the like button, click share. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button as well. Let's grow this audience both on the podcast and YouTube side of things. If you're on podcast land, then I would appreciate it if you go over to iTunes and write a quick review. It doesn't have to be long. A sentence or two would be great. A quick review of this podcast so that others know what to expect. If you're in YouTube land, dropping comments in the comments section, hitting like and subscribe, that all helps bring traffic to the channel and bring people who need to see this information to the channel, get those eyeballs on the screens. That's what we need. All right. And I, of course, want to remind you of the new SpeakPipe option that's on the website, since the site has now been fixed, at least in the manner of how it loads. As I said last week, one of the plugins was causing extremely long load times. Well, I just turned off that plugin and now things work fine. So if you go over to the website, you'll see on the left-hand side the new SpeakPipe widget, which will allow you to leave up to a 3-minute message for me. So if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment or anything else about what you see on the site, the channel, the podcast, etc., please go over to the SpeakPipe widget and do so. So as always, I say it all the time, but I do mean it. As always, thank you for being a part of this audience. Thank you for being here with me. And of course, thank you for your service.